Okay. Hello, everybody. For those who don't know me, I am Lauren Detmer. I'm the community organizer for Love Inc. And also part of our education and outreach action team, along with Tanya and Rachel and Jeannie, as well as Ann Karch, who could not be here tonight. Part of the Educational Outreach Committee's goals is to kind of educate community members and the Love community on different topics of interest. So we put together these learning conversation shorts, since we can't necessarily have learning conversations in person, to really help all of our families that we work with, as well as other community members, which is awesome to see. So tonight, we have decided as an action team to collectively talk about advocating within your IRIS for your loved one's IRIS budget, and just overall like advocacy for IRIS information is really important. We've had a few people have to go through budget amendments, or they just aren't sure what they can put in their IRIS fund. And so we've asked some parents to partake in this that have experience in it and have information and knowledge to share. So I'm going to pass it over to Jeannie. If you just want to introduce yourself, Jeannie, and maybe how old your daughter is and a little bit about Catherine.
Hi, I'm Jeannie Sturkin. My daughter Catherine is the reason I got involved with Love Inc. Catherine's 24 now, so we are recent exits of the transition program in McFarland School District. And she is off working now. She still lives at home with us. We are trying to find a residential support agency, and I think we're moving that direction. So.
Perfect. And then Nancy?
Hi, I'm Nancy Alar, and I have an autistic son. I like to call him gloriously autistic, who is 43 now, and he is a college graduate and he lives by himself. He has a part-time job and a small business and assisted by artworking. And we were originally in the Dane County system before IRIS became a possibility in Dane County. And he was being served under that. And then we transitioned into IRIS when that became a requirement. I think it was about 7 years ago or 6 years ago, something like that.
And then thank you both. We also have a third panelist who hopefully will be joining us. I just texted them a reminder. And so I will allow them to introduce themselves when they get in here, if they're able to join tonight. So I'm going to propose the questions. I will ask them verbally, and I will also put them in the chat for those following along tonight. And I will be taking notes. So if you have any additional information, or if you want additional information, just let me know and I can email it out to those who participated. So our first question is a perfect way to start, and it's going to go to Nancy. So our first question is understanding how my budget is how the budget is created, so I can get the help that I need.
Okay, thank you, Lauren. First of all, this is focusing on IRIS. I respect, I self-direct. And we are not going to be talking about family care tonight. Family care does not have a budget that people can see. And so I'm not going to go there, but just let you know that you have much more control over what is your budget. You even have a budget under IRIS when you don't have something like that under family care. Now, my son has been on IRIS since it became a possibility. And I knew that that was something that we would need to do because he is being served by a local agency that supports artists with disabilities. And he is a longtime customer of theirs. And so we knew we wanted him to stay there. And we also knew that Love Incorporated, the Bridge Builder project, was something that we needed for his support because he was already being supported that way. So in some ways, our situation was a little different than most people who are trying to learn about IRIS now, because we were already receiving some kind of service. And we were able to tell how much money he needed for a budget, because we knew how much they were going to charge with some, chat about this. Although it was a little bit difficult to do, it was very confusing in the beginning. So I understand how people who are just trying to understand it now would see that it's very confusing. But there is one thing you need to remember about IRIS, and that is your IRIS budget is computed automatically by your functional screening exam that your family member goes through when you are first taken in with IRIS. And one of the important things to remember in this functional screening exam is we all want to make sure people know how the accomplishments and the good things about our kids. But for the functional screening exam, you want to portray your family member on their very worst day, because they are going to need the services the most on their very worst day. And an example of how you do that, one of the questions is, does in the functional screening exam is, does your person, family member, handle their own finances? And there isn't a maybe choice. You have to either say yes or no. And my son handles his own checkbook. He balances it. He does his own credit card transactions, et cetera, et cetera. But for that question, we answered no, that he does not handle his own finances. And then we had to justify that, because anybody that looks into it would realize that, yes, he does write checks and stuff like that. But every time he gets any kind of unusual or an unexpected communication from the bank, like, for example, he got a letter one time saying, do you want to increase your credit card limit? He had no idea how to evaluate that question and didn't know how to respond. He needed support that day for that thing. So with a little explanation in the functional screening exam, we were able to explain why he was not able to handle his finances independently. So that's just one example of how you need to, to make sure that they know what your child needs on their worst day. And then again, remember that the functional screening exam, there's an algorithm attached to it, a piece of software, a computer program that will automatically compute your child's budget when you get in there. And that is just how it's going to be. And when you have an IRIS consultant, you get them, at the same time. When we were working with this in the transition, we were able to determine ahead of time what the functional screening exam generated for our budget. And then we were able to retrofit what my son needed to that budget to make sure that he had enough money to do what we were already doing with him. This is not what most of you are going to do. Most of you are going to probably get a surprise in your budget and then have to figure out, well, what kind of services do I need? But if you know ahead of time and have done some research about what your family member might need in the way of services, who is the best support for them, what kind of things would make their life the best, then you have a place to start. And then if you don't have a big enough budget, you can request a budget amendment. But that budget amendment tends to draw sharper scrutiny about your budget than you would get if you didn't have a budget amendment. We made sure that we did not need a budget amendment before we approved our IRIS thing. And that turned out to be really helpful, because my son really needs assistance because he has such communication difficulties. We were able to get funding for a broker for him, basically someone to help with the communication that he cannot do. And that's something that the state has been really reluctant to approve, especially on a long-term basis. They might approve it on a short-term basis, but not on a long-term basis. And a budget amendment that you might have that would draw attention to that would be a problem. Or a budget amendment would draw attention to your whole budget in such a way that it might be subject to review in ways that you might not like. So that's my, if anybody else has anything they want to add about the budget process, I'd be perfectly happy to have that happen.
I agree with you, Nancy. We did get a support broker approved for very specific things, but it was a bit of a struggle. We had to be very specific on what we needed it for and for what duration. At the end of the time period, say 6 months, we were able to extend it because we hadn't satisfied our need with that. But support brokers are a good tool when you need them.
And then Jeannie, I'm actually going to turn it right over to you because I feel like this is a good next question.
I think Lori has a hand up here.
Yes.
Oh,
Can you
go
hear
ahead.
me?
Yep.
Okay. A question. Okay, Liz was evaluated. My daughter Liz was evaluated 5 years ago in Vernon County and has since moved to Dane County. How often is an evaluation done? When can you change the budget without signaling a budget amendment? It's once a year, correct?
Well, the functional screening exam happens annually and it recalculates the budget annually. So
Okay.
that's the only thing that you have any control over. And if you move from Vernon County, they would have a new functional screening exam here at the annual anniversary of when they had it before. One of the things that we did is we made sure to keep copies of that functional screening exam results. We asked for them and were able to get it because we wanted to make sure that functional screening exam looked exactly the same every year. Because if you have a different person, a different iris consultant or somebody else is doing it, you may get different results because they don't know how to answer the questions, to make sure that they get their services on their worst day. So that's one thing we always have kept. And we were very lucky in our choice of iris consultant because we had some advice from people who are aware of the system, and we have someone who's very good. If she ever retires, I'm going to have to shoot myself if I haven't already.
Well, we do have an excellent iris consultant currently, but I am concerned also with what happens if she leaves that position. My next question is about the medical or the broker.
And we are actually getting to that potentially.
Okay, all right.
Perfect. If it's about the support broker aspect, sorry, Lorraine, go ahead.
Just a couple things. I agree with Nancy. Document everything you can on the long-term care functional screen. And what I've found is that so Megan is 41, and so we've done it many times, and she had a budget also and then came into Iris like Nancy's son. The notes in the long-term care functional screen, I believe, are the most important because that's that story where like you might say Megan can cook, but she started a fire once. I'm going to get that fire into those notes. Or she had somebody steal her checks and run up lots of expenses. I'm going to talk about in the notes. Or one time there was a tornado and she didn't know what to do. So is she safe at night alone? No, I'm going to put that in the notes. And so several times I've worked with parents to prepare for the long-term care functional screen and they'll say, oh, he can take a shower totally independently and dress. And then later they'll tell me, but I have to go in and wash his hair because in the shower, the water hurts his face. And I go, well, then he's not independently showering. And so they didn't realize how important that was. It totally changes the score. And so get your iris consultant to write all that stuff in the notes. And then from there you score after you've got your notes nice and filled out. And then the other thing, I didn't realize at the beginning, I should list all of Megan's disabilities. So I got a hold of the list DHS uses, and it's, I don't know, like 400 disabilities. Then I knew to add anxiety disorder, depression, PTSD, allergies, and her physical disabilities of kyphosis and scoliosis. So she ended up qualifying under intellectual and autism as well as physical. So we took the budget from 68,000 to 120. So getting all of that documented is big.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely, Lorraine, you are absolutely right. Those notes are critical in justifying why you are saying what you are saying about your child. Like my son, he can cook for himself, but he's afraid of using knives. And we found in his refrigerator eggs that had been donated to him that were 2 years old. And so he cannot manage food very well at all. And all of that kind of stuff ended up in our notes to prove that he was not independent for cooking. He has to go out and buy most of his food.
And only you would know that. Those stories are golden.
Yes, absolutely.
Perfect. Thank you all. So our next question is actually kind of a perfect transition into it. And this is going to Jeannie. So the question is, what can I put in my budget?
Okay, so what can you put in your budget? I think that in talking about that, you have to know what the state definition is. So I'm going to just read it to you so I have it. Each service, support, or goods must address long-term support needs specific to the individual's functional, vocational, medical, or social needs. Any goal that we put in must contribute to achieving those long-term care outcomes. So any funding that we use has to be addressing what we need to keep someone safe in their home or community. We want to try to decrease reliance on Medicaid funding, or it has to maintain functioning related to the person's disability. So with that definition in mind, I'll give you some practical things that we've used in our daughter's budget and a few that other people have shared with me. Camp is one of the joys in our family's life. Excuse me, our daughter attends respite camp at Easter Seals, Wisconsin camp up in the Wisconsin Dells. It's an overnight camp. It's very unique. If you've never explored it, I'd say it's really worth it. They have different types of camps for different needs. If for someone who's higher, more independence, they go to the Camp Wabeek side where they have more campers so there'd be, say, 3 or 4 campers to one counselor, and respite it would be 1 or 2 campers to a counselor. And a lot of times they're done in cohorts, so they sort of share them. But it's a wonderful chance for the individual to get away and experience the joys of camping that other children would take for granted. And this starts as young age, I think 3 possibly. We didn't do it until age 10 and on up into the 70s or 80s. I mean, it's really a very unique camp we have. Badger Care is another camp over towards Prairie du Chien that does similar things. Your budget can pay for gym memberships. So they can go to the Y or fitness clubs. We have used it for class fees, such as for very special arts. I think it's called Arts for Now. You can sign up for that. Special Olympics, I don't know if there's fees for Special Olympics, but that would be something if there transportation to an event. You can document your mileage. And if you've outlined that as a within your budget, you can get reimbursed for mileage. Let's see, communication aids. So if your individual needs some supports with an app or such, that can be budgeted into your IRIS home or vehicle modifications. They require accessibility assessments before that would be approved, but that is something to keep in mind. For instance, a lift chair, if it's indicated to help someone transfer so that they can do it independently, that would be something that might be approved. Again, we talked about support brokers. So some of the reasons that you might use a support broker would be someone who's moving into a residential placement. They're moving into a apartment or adult family home. The support broker can help you work with a residential support agency. They can help you find different apartments that might be suitable. Another reason for a support broker would be for those individuals transitioning from the high school transition program into the adult services. It's a lot of things that you want to get set up correctly. The support broker was really key for our getting the great IRIS budget that we did get. And then also if an individual is working, that can affect some of their eligibility for Medicaid or SSI has limits on the funds that a individual can have. So the support broker can help you calculate your budget and so you have an idea of where you can be. Let's see, personal emergency system such as Night Owl provides. If your individual needs a pressure sensitive mat, if they get out of bed in the middle of the night, that can be paid for with your IRIS funds. And of course, there's the Love Inc. workshops. I highly recommend those. We've got Moving On for those people that are moving out of the home, for futures for us parents as we age. We want to give some thought to some of the things that we need to consider for whoever is going to be supporting our loved one once we're never around. Bridge builders can be paid for with your IRIS funds. And then personal care. Self-directed personal care or SDPC can be paid for with your IRIS funds. Respite care, and a little bit confusing when I first started with IRIS was it's called SHC, supportive home care. It's somewhat like respite, but it's a different, has different definition by the state, but I would just say it's comparable to respite. For those individuals that might have to attend adult day services, your IRIS funds can cover that. If your individual needs counseling and therapy, or for supported employment services. For those, again, exiting the high schools, IRIS funds can pay for vocational future planning. That was very helpful for us when our daughter was leaving the high school transition program, just as IRIS was coming into Dane County. And so we lost a lot of the supports that had been present for individuals, but the vocational futures planning is helpful in that situation. Or if you have to give some education and training for your workers, that's another possibility that your IRIS funds can be used for. So that's a whirlwind. As Nancy was saying, when you do your functional screen, you do want to make sure that you really, it's sort of a stressful time for parents, I think, because we are used to building up our loved ones. It's the one day that you have to really say, if my person were left in the home by themselves, how would you answer these questions? And you have to be honest about it. And it's either a yes or a no. There's no maybes or sometimes she can do that or he can do that. So do write down your what's important to your loved one that they've been doing to give them a rich life, and then see what's available in the community that might be a club or something that they could enjoy.
I wanted to add one thing to that. My son's IRIS budget includes funds for a cleaning person. because he lives independently, but it's kind of beyond him to keep his apartment neat. Now, normally, how would you justify that? Well, we justify it because if his apartment isn't clean, he lives in a large building downtown, they inspect it once a year, and he could be evicted if his apartment was too messy or not well kept. So we can justify that by saying if he doesn't have this cleaning person, eventually he will likely be evicted. So that's another thing you can put in a budget.
So everything that is in your budget has to be tied to a need. So as Nancy said, that was I would also say safety.
Yes.
Perfect. I was trying to type super fast. So our next question is actually a perfect segue too. So this is going back to Nancy. So what's the best way to track the budget expenditure? I can never say that word. So, we don't understand the monthly report we receive from, the fiscal agency. How can you help us better support that or understand that?
Well, I don't quite understand those reports from the fiscal agency either. And actually, I haven't even looked at them for about the last 3 years because I rely on my support broker, my IRIS consultant to look at those things for me. And I have learned to trust that person, that they are going to look at it. And I know what his budget was. I know what the things that are covered, and that they will continue to be covered. Now, if those rates go up, something might happen, and then I'd have to have a chat with my IRIS consultant about how we manage that. We might end up having to cut back hours or something if a rate goes to the point that he can't afford it anymore under his current budget. I would probably not want to do a budget amendment because since this is an annual process, if you want to keep doing something that required a budget amendment, you probably have to do the budget amendment every year, which is again inviting scrutiny that you might not really want. So our stuff is stable at this point, and our IRIS consultant is monitoring the fact that the right things are being submitted and that the right people are being paid. And so once you get it established and it's not changing a lot, it's probably not going to be something you really have to understand. But I did in the beginning, I did look at these things, and I sat down with our IRIS consultant and said, explain this to me. What does this all mean? And we've pretty much okay. And so I haven't, like I said, I haven't even looked at those statements for quite a while, but it was kind of hard in the beginning. But put the mental effort into it and make sure. That's another way to tell whether your IRIS consultant is really helpful, is if they know what's going on and they can explain it to you. If they can't, then you've probably got a problem there.
Perfect. I think that trust aspect is a really, just a really important part to making sure that you trust your IRIS consultant, and you have that good rapport and relationship with them. You don't have to be best friends, but making sure that you have that really good working relationship with them to best support your loved one is something I always like to remind people as well. It's okay to ask for a different IRIS consultant because it doesn't work. People don't take offense to that, and they realize that, personalities clash sometimes. So Nancy, what's one way that you speak up for yourself and your child, especially during the processes of going through the budget?
Well, the thing that I didn't know anything about the functional screening exam. And I had some really good advice from some people who are really close to the system and were able to tell me what I needed to think about and what I needed to advocate for. Now, again, as somebody else mentioned, if my iris consultant retires, I am going to take steps to make sure, if I'm still around, that whoever becomes iris consultant knows what's going on and appreciates his situation, because that's really, really critical for advocating. And the bottom line is your child living their best life? Or is your family member living their best life? If there's something they really need that you can't afford, then you may need to relook at your functional screening exam and say, well, if they need this service, have I really shown that, them on their worst day needing this service? Because you can change the functional exam if you can justify the fact that they are now doing this or not doing that. So that's how you advocate, is to think about, is your child happy? Are they getting stuff in their life that is enriching? Is there a new service available? And maybe is an old service, like we had some situations where we had an agency change. And so they were no longer being able to give him the services that we needed. So we had to change to a different agency. And it's really frustrating. And also kind of, it just kind of makes you crazy when you're trying to find out information about the system and you don't know who to talk to. So absolutely cultivate a relationship with your iris consultant, and also with other people who are managers of your iris agency, so that if you need advice about what to do about something, you have someone who knows the system to go to. That's really, really important. Because if you're kind of thrashing around and trying to figure out what kind of services or what kind of things to do, and you don't have anyone who is knowledgeable and can give you some advice, then you're going to have problems. So that's really all I can say about speaking up for yourself and your child. And also, there's always the thing about the squeaky wheel gets the grease. Don't be afraid to go to your iris consultant and say, this isn't working, we need to change this. And that's all what everyone always has to do, is you have to say, if it's not working, you have to tell somebody who can do something about it. That's all I can say for that. We've been lucky so far in my case that I haven't had to really go out and beat the bushes about it, but someday that might happen.
Perfect. Okay, Jeannie, you gave us a really great list of things we can put in the IRIS budget. Now, how do we find qualified providers to provide those services within our budget?
So I was thinking about this before I start. I was wondering, just a show of hands, do you use respite providers now? SDPC? Anybody? No? Do you recruit workers? Yes? Okay. All right. So I'm going to probably give you some information that you may find helpful, or possibly, if it's not something that you're using. We have used self-directed personal care hours quite a bit. We have a very generous SDPC budget because my daughter requires quite a bit of assistance with most area of daily living skills. So when I'm looking for workers, I'll just call them providers. The first thing to do is to think about who you know, and possibly people in your neighborhood or your church or faith community, if you have one. You want to think of people maybe that you knew from school. Maybe there's a aide
Are you watching
excuse
TV?
me, just one moment, Warren.
Well, you turned on the TV. Can I shut it off?
Sorry about that. Boys of Zoom and
Okay, hi, sorry. So So you think about people in your neighborhood. Maybe they are the people that you would want to hire as a provider, but they might know someone like that you might. We've had aides that have we knew through the school system that were interested in having a little extra income and would come and work a bit of the week for us. Our primary place, though, really has been UW Job Board. Also, Edgewood and Madison College, or MATC, also do have a student job board. The UW Job Board used to be free. Since it's gone, they charge a small amount, $10 or $15 a month to post your ad. I've had less success with it since they charge, and I don't know if it's because of the way you write the ad, if it gets not seen by as many students or what. But the UW Job Board has been my go-to place. The one downside is that the students, of course, graduate and move on. So we're constantly looking for new people. But before I let them move on, I ask them, do you know any friends or acquaintances? And so I've been able to recruit the next class to come in and help out. When you also think about going to the university, going directly to a department such as rehab psych or nursing or education, and going to their department, look it up online and find a secretary and just say, hey, would you be willing to, do you have a mechanism to share my ad? And then I'll have a simple one-page ad that they usually are very happy to either post on their community board, or in some cases they'll know some specific students that they might want to just shoot it off to. We have had services through United Cerebral Palsy for many years. They do have a respite connecting service, but I don't know that if you haven't used UCP in the past, how able you are to get into them, because they have somewhat of a limited capability of accepting new clients. Social media is another great place to look for providers. You can, if you feel comfortable, put it on Facebook or look on Indeed. I have not used those myself. I am a little bit more selective because they are coming into our home. This past year has been tough for everybody, and my recruitment of providers sort of just tapered off into the point where I wasn't really willing to look for people. So I sort of was saturated with care providing. I talked to my iris consultant and she surprised me. She said, well, how about using an agency? So that's what we did. It's very expensive using an agency. It's going to gobble up your iris budget, but for a short term, I'd say it's worth it if you need it. I wouldn't do it for an extended period of time, but in exceptional times, that's certainly something to provide. When you're looking for a provider, depending on how you do it, if I'm writing an ad, I try to make it have an eye-catching title, something like "Fun with a Young Adult Woman in the Country," or something like that, whatever is pertinent to you. I make sure I put in the details of what the job requires, the skills that they might need. Where we're located is huge because we have no bus access. So they have to have a car to get out to us. Transportation, you want to detail. What hours, and are you flexible, and what days of the week? What's the wage? And if you do get a response to your ad, you want to reply to that person ASAP, because I will guarantee you that they are looking at other jobs, and whoever gets back to them in the first day or two is going to have more success with them. We set up do a quick phone interview, sort of share about each other. And then I set up a time for them to come to our home, meet us and our loved one. And at that time, I tell them before they come, I ask them to give me their references and bring their computer, and we fill out the online application right then and there. And it's off and gone to the agency, because our FEA, Fiscal Employment Agency, GT, will have to do the background check. And then they do a background check and I do the reference check. But that can take anywhere from 2 days to 10 days. So I like to try to get it going, because we're usually ready to hire somebody today when we get a response. So I find the phone interviews, if you're thoughtful, you can very quickly assess whether someone really is a good fit, and if not, then you can sort of cut your losses and tell them thank you for their time. But that's my suggestions for recruiting providers.
I wanted to add to that, we've had a lot of turnover with the cleaning person that we've hired for Matt. And we have looked at within his apartment building to see if there was someone there that might be interested. We also, we've had some surprising good luck recruiting people that our Iris consultant knew in a different capacity, who was willing to earn extra money cleaning. And that was something that I didn't even think of. And we also have gotten people from the college to do that. But again, when they graduate, you're going to have to start all over. But when my son was going to college, we hired someone from the college special education students to act as his spokesperson while he was in college, almost like a broker for college purposes. And that was extremely successful and a win-win for everybody, because that person then had something to put in their resume about working with someone with a disability, which is another thing. If you hire someone like that, you might want to try those departments, because that will help that person if you hire them.
And the FEA, GT independents, fiscal employment agents, once they hire, they've done the background background check, the person can check off whether they would be interested in working for other individuals. So they do have a list, and you can look on that list and see if there might be anybody. I have not found that to be as successful, but yes, anyway.
Helen actually also put something great in the chat, and we actually have 2 members on this group that actually can speak to this. Family members can also be hired, or boyfriends, girlfriends, spouses, all of those people can be hired as well.
Yep.
Yes, they can. If the person is, in our daughter's case, while she's living at home, we get a different code than a person that does not live at. So we are live-in providers, and the codes that are entered when we are entering our personal self-directed personal care hours or supportive home care hours, we have different codes, and it's affecting the taxes, because we do not have taxes taken out as a live-in parent. There's a tax code 14 something or other that explains all that.
Perfect. Thank you for touching on that. So Kristen was not able to join us. It looks like I'm just going to touch on a few questions that we had identified for her. But I think Nancy and Jeannie have actually indirectly covered them, which is great. So we do have the questions, how to identify what needs to ask for. I think it really files back to that functional screening evaluation process. So making sure that you are filling that out on your loved one's worst day. I know it's hard as a family member for your loved one, but it is really important because that can go through how you adjust your needs. And then I think the other one is, who do I contact if I have an issue with my provider? I think there's multiple ways of answering this one. If it's somebody that you have hired, I think you could go to their agency if they work for an agency like Jeannie had said. If you are their employer, I think that would be something that you have to talk to them directly. In terms of working with, nonprofit agencies, obviously going to the executive director or somebody on the staff is really important. And then obviously, like if you have issues with your IRIS consultant, Nancy had mentioned talking about making those relationships with the IRIS managers. So then you have somebody to turn to if situations do arise and you have that trusting relationship. So yes. And then there's some stuff in the chat that it looks like got answered. So I'm hoping that is accurate. We have probably time for maybe one question. I know Laureen submitted a question about um, do you want to repeat your question, Laureen?
You're muted.
There you go.
Yep. Thank you. So the electronic verification, the EVV, has anybody been dealing with that? I haven't yet. And I've been urging our supportive home care agency to get us going because a friend told me that her daughter's staff had made lots of mistakes, but that it was in a trial time, and in January is the hard launch. And so has anybody been using it, and any problems that have come up?
Which FEA do you have?
I don't have an FEA because I have an agency.
Which agency?
Pardon me?
Which agency?
It's called Best Life Residential.
Oh, okay. I couldn't address that. We do use the EVV system. My daughter's workers clock in when they get here with it. It's an app that they have on their phone, and they clock out. In the long run, most of the time, 90% of the time, it's really great. I love it. When it glitches, it's sort of annoying. And that's when I get mad at the, it's an app thing. And I think that they're gonna, as long as people are using phones and phones get updated, apps are gonna glitch. So I don't know how it's gonna roll out.
Okay. So in the past, a different agency, we had to clock in and out, and they set the GPS around Megan's home. And, we had to adjust because if they were a half a block away and they thought they were clocking in, it didn't really. But they pick her up at work, and that won't be appropriate because you're not close to the home when they clock in. And so I have a lot of those kinds of questions, but
I don't know that that's an important thing, is it? That they clock in at their home, or because all it's doing is just telling them, well, this is the shift I'm working, this is where I'm located, rather than I'm at the mall, not with the person. I think that, I don't know that it matters because supportive home care can be provided anywhere in the community. It doesn't have to be in the home.
doesn't have to start and end at the home.
No.
Good. Or I thought, what if the shift changes? She gets sick, I call off a shift, but yet I want to pay them because I changed that shift schedule at the last minute. But I think I'm going to have to figure that out as I go.
Well, if they don't work, you wouldn't be able to use supportive home care.
Well, I think with our agency, they have a rule that if there's a last minute change in a set shift, that they actually.
I think that they could get paid, but I don't think it will be with your supportive home care. I think that would be fraud.
Yeah, okay.
I would talk to the ADRC or your IRIS consultant. I'm guessing, I don't know, so sorry.
And maybe because it's an agency versus a direct hire, agency's got a different policy. But I'll learn that. Thanks, Lauren, for taking a moment on that.
And I know that it is the EVV is a newer system going into place that a lot of our families are going to be seeing and dealing with the challenges of, and we actually take those into consideration and those topics into consideration for the education outreach team. We just can't speak to it as, and we don't want to say anything wrong as it is a newer system. And the pushback has been getting pushed back. So, or keeps getting pushed back, I should say.
I want to add one thing about, they mentioned the rates in the chat of $15 an hour for live-in assistance. If you are hiring a support broker, the rate is significantly higher. That's one reason they are kind of, snarky about people trying to use support brokers for any long-term support. And I am currently, I believe, paying something in the neighborhood of $60 an hour for our support broker, but we have the budget because they aren't spending 8 hours a day. They're only spending, certain the number of hours per month for that. But that again is something that they don't like having long-term, but my son has such severe communication issues that he really needs somebody like that long-term. In fact, they're dealing right now with some horrible snafu that we have with the Social Security Administration, and the Social Security sent my son a letter demanding that he pay back $12,000 to them because they screwed up and paid him too much money over the last 10 years. And, my support broker is handling that with people, other people, and getting advice. So I'm trying to step back and doing less and less as I get older so that his support is in place when I am no longer available.
Yeah.
And that's really difficult to do. I always tell people who are working with me, their job is to fire me, and it's not going to be easy. So just, as a parent, you're just in there and trying to get stuff done. But you have to build up a support system that will still be in place and working when you're not available anymore.
Would that support broker be a person that would go to medical meetings, or?
They could be, but that's not probably what I would use them for. They are doing more of the paperwork, the interfacing with Medicaid, Medicare reporting, that kind of thing that my son is absolutely incapable of doing.
Yeah.
We could get, some other person, like a college student, to go with him to medical appointments, or some other person in his support team, but probably not that with the support broker.
Okay, thank you.
But they might be able to find somebody to do that for him. That's also a bridge builder thing, maybe.
Oh, okay.
Maybe, probably not. That might be
Probably
a little,
not.
but we do I will say this, we do have members that have personal care workers that will go into medical appointments with them and help advocate for need, as needed, or being a second set of ears. And we've heard really great success with that. And it's something that is really being encouraged a lot more in the disability world. And I've actually attended webinars about the importance of medical advocacy. So yes. Well, perfect. Well, I wanted to thank Jeannie and Nancy. I want to be knowledgeable of everybody's time. We already went a little bit over, which I figured we would. But thank you guys all for the questions and joining us tonight. I will be sending out a Zoom link, or not a Zoom link, I'm sorry, a YouTube link of this recording, as well as some just additional information and the notes that I took overall in the agenda. If you have any additional questions, please feel free to message me. If I cannot help you, I can usually try to connect you to somebody who can. So yes. Thank you guys so much.